Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure to be here. I think this is a very special occasion for us from a UN's perspective, UNDP's perspective, to talk to you here outside of International Geneva as well, and with the purpose of trying to perhaps decipher some of the myths around the UN, the cuts, and our role in International Geneva. And first of all, let me thank very much and congratulate Alliance Sud for the organization of this event. This is a critical moment in time, and in the engagement of civil society is vital to mobilize public support and demonstrate the continuous importance of international cooperation and multilateralism for the world, and I really believe also for Switzerland. So let me start by introducing a little bit UNDP for those of you who don't know the UN alphabet soup, as we say. I would say UNDP, and hopefully it resonates with you, UNDP is the Swiss knife of the UN system. First of all, it's because we get the job done, like any good Swiss knife would do. And second of all, because like a good Swiss knife, there are a lot of tools in the toolbox for UNDP that doesn't just do the job that we are mandated to do, but also helps the rest of the UN system to operate. It may not be a very well-known fact, but for example, we provide operational backbone support for many of the UN agencies who work on the ground, regionally and globally, to make sure that they can do their job more efficiently, not being bogged down with operational support services. But our key mandate is sustainable development. We work in 170 countries. We're one of the unique UN organizations that has a universal presence in developing countries. And our main aim is to address, of course, the development issues in these countries, to accompany these countries on their pathway of development, depending on their context, respond to crisis, reduce poverty, build strong and responsive institutions, and protect the planet. As we heard in the opening speech, I think we all recognize that we are at crossroads from many perspectives. We live in a deeply troubled world where the needs of the most vulnerable are looming larger than ever. Yet, as the crises around us multiply, UNDP and other UN organizations are asked to do more with less. When global development cooperation funds are falling sharply, according to the OECD DAC, 17 to 20% of funds that go into right now to the development system will be lost in 2025 and even more later on in 2026 and beyond. But I think we need to be frank. We cannot do more with less. We can only do less with less. And the impact will not only be on UN agencies. It's not just about the numbers. Actually, it is not about the numbers being cut in Geneva and elsewhere. This is about the countries where we will do less. This is about the direct impact that ultimately will have an impact on global prosperity, global security, and that is not only a global issue, but of course, it's also of interest of countries where this will reflect, like Switzerland. So allow me to share a few aspects of this with you. We know the political context of the United States, but maybe a less known fact is that actually the cuts to aid that are happening now and that you're debating in the Swiss Parliament as well go well beyond the United States. Many countries in Europe significantly reduce their contributions to development cooperation, multilateral cooperation, humanitarian assistance. Switzerland is one of the greatest supporters of the system and to UNDP a very, very close partner, and we appreciate that contribution. But when we look at the past 10 years, Swiss contributions to UNDP's budget, for example, decreased by 44% just in 10 years. But we also need to recognize that actually funding should come, development investments should come from a more diverse source of funds. It should not just be the high-income OECD DAC countries, the traditional donors as we call them. We need to appreciate that countries are actually stepping up to contribute from other parts of the world, including the countries where we work in. A lesser known fact that a quarter of our budget comes from the program countries where we work in, such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, India, Indonesia, or Peru, who are investing in their own development through the UN system, NGOs, and other partners as well, because they see it as a way forward on their development pathways and eventually taking over some of the processes where the UN system is supporting. Now, in terms of the funding structure, I also would like to explain something that is probably not a very commonly known fact. We talk about reductions in cuts, and in fact, while some parts of the UN system receives so-called assessed contributions, which are mandatory contributions that member states contribute as, let's say, a membership fee to the UN system, the programs and funds like UNDP, like UNICEF, like the World Food Programme, that actually works on the ground to benefit communities, people on the ground, and working with the government, civil society on the ground, have no such contribution. Our starting budget is zero. So if we don't mobilize the funds, whether it's from investments from grants, whether it's financing from financial institutions or from the program countries, we cannot get the job done. That's mandated to us by member states. So I think we also need to understand that when we're talking about funding and the investments from our partners. Consequently, what we're also looking at is that when we're cutting this funding, this actually cuts our ability to operate on the ground. This is not about sustaining an apparatus. This is about continuing the programming investments. Then, if you look at the impact of the aid cuts, the impact is, of course, at all levels. What you see often in the news and quoted the numbers, especially in Switzerland, given the importance of International Geneva, is the cuts to the UN agencies. But the impact is really at the level of the people and the stabilities of the regions where we work, the rule of law, the governance systems that make anything possible in developing countries. But indeed, parts of the UN system have experienced drastic cuts overnight, with cuts having a disproportionate impact at the country level, where many emergency programs had to be cut from one day to another. At the level of Geneva, I think you've all heard the numbers, nearly 3,000 positions have been cut across all the agencies like WHO, IOM, UNHCR, UNAIDS, UNICEF. I'm sure you've heard the organizations that have been heavily impacted. At UNDP, we strongly value the unique Geneva ecosystem, and thanks to the support of the Swiss partners at the federal and cantonal level, we want to maintain our presence in Geneva, especially on crisis work, where it's an international hub for cooperation, building more coherent responses with the humanitarian, peace, digital, and finance sectors. But at the same time, we are also forced to make savings of about $100 million next year. And let's be honest, we need to match strategy with financial feasibility. And this is the dilemma and the very, very hard decisions that UN agencies will need to do now, understanding our strategic needs, but also having to deal with the financial realities around us. Having been in this job in Geneva for 4 years now, the situation really saddens me because I see the unique potential of International Geneva ecosystem. It's a unique presence of member states. Other than New York, where else in the world we have all member states where we can really provide this platform for dialogue and bringing it together with other constituencies. It's a connective tissue between various centers of world-class expertise, a platform for innovation, and a strong capacity to bring different constituencies together. So we need more collaboration, not less, and I hope that International Geneva will be able to maintain that platform that it offers. But beyond, and more importantly, the cuts on UN agencies, the reduction in funding to international cooperation especially hit the poorest hardest. It is estimated that the least developed countries will see the reductions in aid by 20% next year. Let me give you some examples. For example, WFP estimates that between 10.5 and 13.7 million people could be pushed into acute food security. UNICEF estimates that at least 14 million children have their access to essential nutrition support disrupted. It affects various parts of responses to the refugee crisis, to migration, to support the women's rights organization, and the reproductive and health agencies as well. But beyond these immediate impacts, if the current trend is not halted, these cuts will also reverse hard-won development gains. So we're not just losing future support, but we're actually losing what we have already invested in. One less known impact of these cuts is also the system-wide efficiency. cuts in flexible funding that reduce our capacity. As I mentioned, we are a universal agency in developing countries, and this is a unique advantage when we're looking at how to reach the most vulnerable and how we connect the dots across the different countries, and this is also threatened with the shrinking funding envelope. So think about it this way. The UN system was gradually built after a unique political consensus in 1945 after World War II, and slashing international cooperation budgets and breaking this system into pieces now would actually create a massive risk for the world. In an interdependent world where global challenges such as pandemic, climate, or displacement risk are increasing, not reducing, why would we dismantle a system that was set up to address that? We may have to reform it, but there is a huge risk in dismantling it. Now, don't get me wrong, we also recognize that there is always room for more efficiency. And the UN, just like any other large organization, just like parts of governments, any private organizations could benefit from efficiencies, from reforms, and this is why the Secretary General did launch a so-called UN 80 initiative, which is to address these reforms. It's looking at restructuring and realignment programs, practical review of the mandates, looking at structural reforms. And we need your voice as Switzerland and as other member states to help us through that process and make sure that we emerge as a stronger and more fit-for-purpose organization that helps member states to achieve the objectives that we share. We are also intrinsically convinced that supporting the UN's work to advance peaceful, stable, and sustainable societies can in turn help countries to advance their own domestic foreign policy and national security, contributing directly to domestic economies. We also hear growing doubts about the value of multilateralism. I am a true believer in the concept of shared humanity, and I fully appreciate the long history of Swiss humanitarian support and solidarity around the world. Yet, one of our recent studies has actually shown that 6 out of 7 people in the world feel insecure, and undeniably, people in Switzerland and elsewhere are also faced with their own challenges. This is exactly why we need to move beyond charity narratives to recognize our interdependencies. International cooperation remains an essential part for this, for addressing the global challenges that we cannot address because they surpass national boundaries. In the spirit of mutual interest, development is actually one of the smartest and most humane investments we can make. We must dispel the myth that investing in development abroad comes at the expense of our own prosperity and security. The truth is the opposite. Development is security. To tackle the underlying causes of forced migration, prevent the next conflict, and shield children from climate breakdown and pandemics. That requires investments in development rather than reacting to the problem later. Accordingly, for example, when Switzerland invests in multilateralism and international cooperation, it is not just doing the right thing from a moral standpoint. This is leadership. This is leadership that enhances security, reputation, influence, and ability to shape global roles on trade, technology, and other areas that are actually of interest to the country. And this is precisely why invisible work that we do sometimes is under threat now. For example, good governance, that again is a word and a buzzword that may not be well understood, rarely trends on social media or dominates the news, but it is the quiet engine of progress. Behind every school, every hospital, every digital service and green energy solution is a matter of strong institutions, a rule of law, and transparent public finance. When governance fails, the costs are real: lost resources, stalled reforms, instability, and public mistrust, which eventually will come back to this part of the world. In a world of integrated and interconnected value chains, I think it's also important to give you some examples of why it matters and hopefully should matter to Switzerland as well. For example, commodity trading is a significant part of the Swiss economy. And for famous Swiss products like the Swiss chocolate and coffee, which is an integral part of not just your economy, but the image of Switzerland, the production relies on importations and on the work of farmers in Africa and Latin America that are increasingly impacted by climate change and other economic shocks. So in this context, decrease in their production will not only impact the livelihoods of the farmers, but actually has direct impact on the Swiss economy. Of course, beyond fair trade and economic growth, we fully recognize the growing need for investments in security. But it is not enough to invest only in military and defense capacities, and to what extent we need to ask ourselves, to what extent does this really increase our collective security? History has shown many times that rearmament alone rarely leads to peace. Researchers have repeatedly demonstrated that long-term peace and stability are promoted through the maintenance of the international legal order, diplomacy, good governance, and sustainable development. Funding increased military budgets by reducing official development assistance is a dangerous course if the goal is a more peaceful and stable world. According to the IMF, every dollar invested in prevention, maintaining development, the rule of law, saves up to $103 later on in conflict-related costs. But beyond statistics, multilateral development cooperation works and still delivers. 3 quick concrete examples to hopefully give you an idea of how and the impact of the Switzerland partnership with UNDP. On crisis response, we have been working in Ukraine, which is one of the key priority areas of Switzerland for multilateral support as well, on resilience. So when the war started, part of the reason why the government could continue function is because we have invested in digital governance solutions that could continue to deliver on public services to the public in a situation where physical contact was not possible. More than 20 million Ukrainians benefited from e-services, and beyond these services, we're also supporting demining agricultural lands and recovering back areas that have been covered by mine and other explosive ordinances. On climate, just another example why the recent COP30 has delivered mixed reactions, and I think you have also debated that. We need to recognize that the Paris Agreement has also unleashed the biggest economic transformation of our age. With $2 trillion invested in clean energy in 2024, twice as much as fossil fuels. We are now supporting countries, more than 100 countries, to design and implement of their climate plans, benefiting more than 2 billion people. This is an example where the initial investment in development creates a new industry, creates new investments, which eventually are taken over by the market. On the economic side, my last example is on Swiss insurance sector. Partnering with entities like Swiss Re and Zurich Re, Celsius Pro, our programs are leading for financial innovation that actually strengthens resilience in developing countries, but also opens new markets for the Swiss insurance sector. So finally, I think what we need to note is that this is indeed a pivotal moment that carries major implications. And when we're talking about investments in development cooperation, in multilateralism, budget discussions in Parliament, this is not about the UN. This is really about the risk of all of our security, all of our prosperity. And this is a risk for a world without the UN or any multilateral mechanism that works, which is a collective risk that I'm wondering if we're willing to take. As we navigate the current funding challenges, I want to reiterate that we are deeply grateful to Switzerland for its steadfast support and the predictable funding that you provide, not just to UN, UNDP and UN system, but to development cooperation and humanitarian assistance in general, to maintain this strong partnership that allows us to then leverage not only other funding, financing sources, but also to reach way beyond the investment that Switzerland provides. And remember that Switzerland's support is not only charity. This is actually enlightened self-interest and a smart investment for security and prosperity. Thank you very much.